welcome to Connect the World. I'm Lynda Kinkade in Atlanta. We are following two major stories this hour. It's day two of the Senate impeachment trial of U.S. President Donald Trump, and he currently right now is in Davos. He is touting the U.S. economic achievements and the new trade deals, and of course blasting the impeachment trial before he leaves Switzerland. Plus, our Max Foster has an exclusive interview with the heir to the British throne, Prince Charles. We're going to bring you that interview shortly. Well, we are just hours away from the opening arguments in President Trump's impeachment trial. They will follow a fiery debate that went on into the early morning hours. Now, the rules of the trial are set after Democrats failed in their repeated attempts to be allowed to subpoena witnesses and documents. Well, House managers and the president's lawyers are facing a deadline to file new motions. A few hours ago, before leaving Davos, President Trump weighed in on the impeachment fight. Take a listen to what he had to say.
I'll tell you the way I look at it. It's a total hoax. It's a disgrace. They talked about their tremendous case, and it's all done, their tremendous case. They had no case. It's all a hoax. It's a con job, like Schiff. He's a corrupt politician. Now, I'll leave that to the Senate. The Senate's going to have to answer that. I have great respect for the Senate as a body and many of the individuals. I have great respect. So I'll leave that to the Senate.
Well, our White House correspondent Jeremy Diamond is in Davos for us now. Also, U.S. congressional correspondent Phil Mattingly is in Capitol Hill. Good to have you both with us. I'll start with you, Jeremy, because that was indeed a pretty long and rambling press conference from U.S. President Trump. And he was asked, obviously, a lot about the impeachment trial and whether witnesses should be called. What did he say?
Yeah, well, you heard the president there at the end there saying that'll be up to the Senate, and that is what the president was saying today. Of course, we've heard him give a million different answers on this very same topic, suggesting on the one hand that he would like to see witnesses, particularly the whistleblower, to see Vice President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, appear on the floor of the Senate. And of course, the president's own lawyers are arguing against having witnesses come forward, any witnesses at all. So that is kind of how the president spun it today. He was a little bit more specific when it came to his former national security advisor, John Bolton, who, of course, Senate Democrats are trying to get to come forward as a witness in this trial. It's unclear as of now if enough Republicans will join them once these initial arguments are made in order to bring John Bolton forward. But the president said that basically it's an issue of national security, a question of executive privilege, arguments that we've heard him use before. But at the same time, we also heard the president say today that part of the reason he doesn't want him to come forward is because they didn't exactly end their relationship on great terms, meaning that John Bolton, when he left the White House, fired according to the president, resigned according to John Bolton, that they didn't leave on good terms. And so the president seems to be concerned, perhaps, that if John Bolton comes forward, he'll have an axe to grind against the president.
Exactly. Well, that would be interesting to hear from him if he does indeed come forward. If you can just stand by for us, I will come back to you. I want to go to Phil Mattingly because it certainly was a long day yesterday, day one of this trial. Finishing close to 2 a.m. Next hour, the trial resumes. What can we expect?
So here's what you're going to want to pay attention to going forward. One, everybody needs caffeine desperately at this point, Lynda. For those of us who are here until 2 a.m. and are now already back here. So an hour ago was the deadline for any motions related to the trial to be filed by either the White House defense team or the House managers. Our expectation at this point in time is none will be filed, which is good news from a process side of things. That means what we are going to see when the Senate trial gavels into session at 1 p.m. is pretty much the immediate start to opening arguments from the House managers. Now, they will have 3 days, 24 hours total to present the entirety of their case against President Trump. Their case for why the president should be removed from for the first time in U.S. history, in this only the third impeachment trial in U.S. history. But there's one other thing you really need to keep an eye on. Obviously, they will be presenting a case, much of which we've heard at various points over the last couple of months, but they have a target audience here. And it's not just the public. It is a very select group of Republican senators, those Republican senators, 4 or 5, maybe 6 tops, who those Democrats, those House managers need to vote with them later on in the process to assure there will be subpoenas for witnesses and documents. It only takes 51 senators to basically dictate whether or not that is going to occur. Only 47 Democrats in the U.S. Senate chamber. That means they're going to need at least 4 Republicans to join them. My understanding right now is for the House managers, that is their target audience. Try and get moderate Republican senators who are on the fence with witnesses to come their way based on what they present over the course of the next 3 days, Lynda.
A busy few days, and of course, Phil, the chief Justice John Roberts had to admonish or admonished both sides yesterday. He certainly is going to have his work cut out over the coming days.
Yeah, no question about it. And look, if you ever needed a reason to tune in for the entirety of the proceedings, this happened at about 12:45 a.m. this morning, when I think most people were either asleep or their eyes had glazed over. What was occurring on the floor is a pretty intense back and forth between House Democratic Manager Jerry Nadler, a Democrat from New York, and the president's lawyers, who were going back and forth, really kind of accusing one another of lying, making pretty sharp accusations as to the intentions of the other. And at one point, John Roberts, the Chief Justice, who is presiding over the entirety of this trial, stepped in and said, look, you guys need to, and I'm quoting here, remember you're in front of the world's greatest deliberative body, what the United States Senate is often called, and essentially told them, tone it down a little bit, understand where you are. Now, it's worth noting the Chief Justice has an enormous amount of power in this Senate trial if he wants to use it. But the expectation is, not unlike what we saw in Bill Clinton's trial in 1999 with Chief Justice Rehnquist, he's going to be very passive. He will let the Senate decide kind of how this is going to go moving forward. However, last night proved that he's not afraid to step in if he feels like it's necessary. We'll see if it happens the rest of the way. But don't sleep, and I don't mean a pun in that, don't sleep on the Chief Justice. He has some power here, and he can weigh in and kind of change the dynamics of how things are going.
Well, hopefully everyone gets a bit more sleep tonight. Phil Mattingly, good to have you there for us. I want to go back to Jeremy Diamond in Davos, because as representatives from some of the world's biggest companies spoke about plans to go carbon neutral, we did hear from US President Trump, who seemed to liken climate scientists to fortune tellers.
Yeah, and he did worse than that, frankly, in his speech yesterday. He compared them to doomsdayers, suggesting that these are people, climate activists, scientists who back climate change, who are people who are essentially predicting Armageddon from one decade to the next. Of course, the science behind climate change and the climate crisis is overwhelming. There's an overwhelming scientific consensus behind that, but the president made quite clear during his trip to Davos that he was not on the same page. That is despite the fact, of course, that the World Economic Forum this year was focused on that climate crisis. Now, the president was asked today whether or not he thinks the United States needs to do more, particularly after the president has pulled out of the Paris Climate Accords, after many of his administration's policies have essentially rolled back a lot of the progress made towards countering climate change. Here's what he said.
We have to do something about other continents. We have to do something about other countries. When we're clean and beautiful and everything's good, but you have another continent where the fumes are rising at levels that you can't believe. I mean, I think Greta ought to focus on those places.
And you hear the president there mentioning that teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg. The president clearly hasn't let go of that spat. You know that the president, of course, had referred to her anger management problems in the past, talking about that teenage climate activist. The president raised that again today, and he also raised the fact that she had beat him out for Times Person of the Year. It seems the president is still holding a grudge there.
Yeah, no surprise there. Jeremy Diamond for us in Davos, Switzerland. Phil Mattingly on Capitol Hill. Good to have you both with us. Thank you.